My name is Jordan Taylor. I'm 28. I live in Wisconsin. And until very, very recently, I was the person quietly holding my family together while they slowly tore me apart. It happened on Christmas. I remember the smell of cinnamon candles and roasted turkey. I remember Bing Crosby playing in the background, that stupid fake fireplace flickering on the TV. I remember thinking, maybe this year will be different. It wasn't, because right there, during dinner, while I passed around the sweet potato casserole I'd made from scratch, while everyone complimented how the house looked like a page out of a holiday magazine, my dad leaned back in his chair, took another sip of the whiskey I bought, and said in a voice loud enough for the room to fall silent, "You're nothing but a leech, Jordan. Always taking, never giving back." I wish I could tell you I yelled. I wish I flipped the table and poured that whiskey down the drain. But I didn't. I blinked. Because in that moment, after years of silence, sacrifice, and suppression, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. Cold, pure, clear. I looked around the table. 14 people, every one of them sitting under the roof I paid for, eating food I bought, warmed by a heating bill I'd covered since I was 24. And still, I was the leech. I set down my fork, wiped my mouth, and said with a voice steadier than it had any right to be, "Okay." That was it. No dramatic monologue, no emotional outburst, just that one word. And behind it, a plan already forming. Let me back up a little. Because to understand why those words cut so deep, you need to understand what came before them. I wasn't always the breadwinner. My dad, Leonard, used to work in manufacturing sales. He was loud, confident, the kind of guy who filled a room whether you wanted him to or not. Mom was quieter. She taught music part-time at the local elementary school. We weren't rich, but we were fine. I took dance classes, we had birthday parties, road trips in the summer. But everything changed when I was 23. Dad got laid off. Company restructuring, they called it. No pension, no prospects. He said it was temporary. We all believed him, until a year passed, then 2. He stopped applying to jobs, started drinking more, stopped shaving, stopped getting dressed, started treating the couch like a lifeline and the remote like a second hand. Meanwhile, I had just graduated college, landed a job in digital marketing. Nothing flashy, but solid. And when things got tight, I moved back in, just for a bit, to help out, to get on my feet. That's what I told myself. But in reality, I was walking into a trap disguised as family loyalty. At first, it felt good. I was the dependable one, the one who could handle it. Dad was struggling, sure, but Mom appreciated me, or at least she said she did. So I paid a few bills, then a few more, then the mortgage, then both car notes, then groceries, then streaming services, then their phones. Suddenly, my bank account wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. I was 25 and spending more than half my income on a lifestyle I didn't live in. For people who stopped saying thank you after the second month. And the worst part? I let them. The manipulation wasn't loud. It was soft, casual. "Could you just grab the power bill this month? We're a little tight right now, you understand. Think of it like paying back all those years we raised you. You're doing so well, sweetie. Your father just needs time." Time turned into years. And in those years, something else started changing. Me. I stopped going out, skipped vacations, postponed starting a savings account, said no to a promotion because it required relocating. Why? Because I couldn't leave them, because they'd fall apart without me, because I was responsible, because no one else would step up, because I loved them. God help me, I loved them so much it hurt, until it hurt more to stay. Last Christmas I pulled out all the stops. I decorated the whole house, strung lights, baked pies, Bought presents, real ones, not on-sale gifts from discount stores. A cashmere sweater for Mom, a Nixon watch for Dad. The same model he once pointed at in a store window and sighed, "Maybe someday." Someday came, and I made it happen. The house glowed. The food was perfect. Even the music was on point. And for a second, just a second, I thought, this is it. This is the Christmas that brings us back together. But when I mentioned, gently, cautiously, that I was considering moving out in the spring, Dad's smile dropped. His eyes narrowed. And then, "So that's it? You're cashing out and leaving the rest of us behind? Typical." I didn't understand. I blinked, stuttered. I just thought, maybe it's time I... And then came the sentence that broke me. "You've always been a leech, Jordan. You just hide it behind your paychecks." The silence that followed felt like a vacuum. I looked to my mom. She was stirring her wine glass, pretending not to hear. I looked to my uncle. He suddenly found his dinner roll very fascinating. I looked to my cousins. No one met my eyes. And I realized they all thought it too, or at least no one thought he was wrong. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter and started becoming their lesson. After that Christmas night, I didn't sleep, not even a little. I lay in my childhood bedroom, still painted soft lavender with glow-in-the-dark stars clinging to the ceiling like they were afraid to fall, and stared at the shadows on the wall. It felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life, or maybe stepped out of the one I'd been pretending was mine. My body was still, but inside there was a fire. Not rage, not yet. It was quieter, like kindling, finally catching a spark after years of being soaked. I knew where it started. I'd just never let myself say it out loud before. It started when I was 15. That was the first time I remember feeling it, the weight. We were on a family trip to Michigan, a long weekend at a lakeside cabin, one of those rare times when we all got to be together without work or school or errands. I remember Dad had just come back from a bait shop, grinning like a kid, showing off the fishing pole he'd splurged on. $200, he boasted, but worth it. A man needs a real rod, not those department store toys. I remember Mom smiling, laughing nervously. And I remember the quiet that followed when she opened the cooler and saw we barely had food for dinner. She pulled me aside that night, whispered like we were allies in a secret war. "Your dad means well. He just gets caught up sometimes. Be patient with him." That night, I used my own babysitting money to buy eggs and bread from a nearby corner store. Nobody asked me to. Nobody thanked me either. But I did it. Because I saw something in my mom's eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not of him hurting her, no. But fear that if she didn't cover the gap, things would collapse. So she folded. And I followed. People think dysfunction happens all at once, like a big fight or some dramatic betrayal. But in my family, dysfunction was a slow drip. It was just this one time. It was, "We'll pay you back next month." It was, "You're so mature for your age." It was, "Your brother doesn't get it, but you do." It was little things like me paying for gas on the way home from college, even when I was broke. Skipping prom dress shopping because Dad needed a new suit for a job interview that never happened. Giving up my part-time income to help cover the car insurance when Mom's hours got cut. It was always just a phase, just a season. But the seasons never changed, and I became the weather. After college, I moved back in. I told myself it was to save for a down payment, that I'd only be there a few months. That's what I said out loud. What I didn't say? I was scared to leave them. Not because they couldn't survive, but because I didn't think they would even try. They had gotten used to me solving things, and I had gotten used to being needed. It gave me purpose. It made me feel useful. It made me feel important, which is a dangerous thing for a girl who was always told her emotions were too much, her opinions were too loud, and her needs were a bit much for the family right now. When Dad lost his job, I was 23. He was 54. Not old, not broken, not incapable. But he acted like he'd been banished from the workforce forever. Every rejection hardened him. Every no thank you from a company added another layer of bitterness to his voice. And slowly, he stopped trying. He claimed the world didn't want someone his age, that the market was rigged, that all the jobs were for kids who knew how to post on TikTok and wear skinny jeans. So he retreated, first from interviews, then from friends, then from family, and finally, from himself. He sat, he drank, he raged. And Mom? She adapted. She worked more hours. She shopped less. She smiled smaller. She became the air freshener of the house, masking rot with vanilla scent. And I did what I'd always done. I stepped in. I filled the fridge. I paid the bills. I kept the lights on, literally and metaphorically. I told myself this was what good daughters do. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I had a choice. But the truth? I didn't even know what a choice looked like. There's this thing nobody tells you about being the responsible one. It starts as a compliment. You're so dependable, Jordan. We don't know what we'd do without you. You're a rock. And at first, it feels good. It makes you stand taller. It makes you feel like you matter, like your existence has weight. But then it mutates, because slowly, being the rock becomes being the foundation. And being the foundation means everything. Every crack, every broken thing rests on you. And if you dare to crumble, everything falls. So you don't. You hold it. You hold them. Even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. It got worse after my first real raise. I was 25, and my agency had just promoted me to digital strategy lead. I was proud. I had worked my ass off, stayed late most nights, volunteered for all the annoying weekend campaigns no one else wanted. I had earned it. So I took everyone out to celebrate. Mom, Dad, even my aunt and uncle who lived nearby. I booked a reservation at this trendy new place downtown, ordered wine, paid the bill, gave a toast. And you know what Dad said? Guess the system really does hand out prizes to the loudest kids, huh? I laughed, thought maybe he was joking, but he wasn't. All night he made jabs about how real work doesn't happen on a laptop, and how marketing was just tricking people into buying garbage. He even suggested my promotion was probably some kind of diversity hire. They need women these days. Good timing for you, huh? I remember going to the bathroom and staring at myself in the mirror for a long time, trying to figure out how I could feel so invisible and targeted at the same time, like I didn't exist except as a punching bag. And Mom? She followed me to the hallway, told me not to take it personally. He's just threatened, honey. You know how hard this has been for him. I nodded, wiped my mascara, went back to the table, paid the check, and smiled. That night stuck with me, because it was the first time I realized he wasn't just disappointed in his life, he was angry about mine. My success didn't make him proud, it made him bitter. Every step I took forward reminded him that he hadn't moved in years, and instead of dealing with that pain, he dumped it on me. From there, things spiraled. When my car broke down and I mentioned I might not be able to cover both the mortgage and repairs, Dad told me to just finance a new one. You've got good credit. Might as well use it. This, from the man whose credit score had cratered. This, from the man who once called debt a lazy man's addiction. He had no problem watching me take on more weight, because in his mind, that's what I was there for: the human safety net, the backup generator, the emergency fund, the fixer. Mom wasn't much better. Her way of coping was silence and sugarcoating. She'd buy organic groceries we couldn't afford, order new curtains off Etsy, add a dozen little things to the monthly Target bill, all while saying, "We're barely making it," while I was footing nearly $3,500 a month. And yet, I said nothing. I kept paying. Why? Because they were my parents. Because love is supposed to be unconditional. Because that's what good daughters do, right? I remember one night, around October, I came home late from work. The house was dark except for the flickering blue light of the TV. Dad was snoring in his chair, empty bottle of Jack on the coffee table. I stood there for a full minute, just watching him breathe, counting the rise and fall of his chest, and all I could think was, if I disappeared tomorrow, would he even notice? I knew the answer. He'd notice when the mortgage bounced, when the electricity got cut, when the fridge stopped being full. But me? The me behind the paycheck? I didn't think he even saw her anymore. Maybe he never had. I tried talking to Mom, sat her down one Saturday and said, "We need to reassess things." I explained that I wanted to save for an apartment, maybe go back to school eventually, start actually building something of my own. She blinked, then smiled, then started tearing up. "We've always supported your dreams, sweetie." "No," I said. "You supported them when they didn't interfere with yours, when they didn't require you to get uncomfortable, when they didn't threaten the system we'd built, where I sacrifice and you survive." She got quiet, then said what she always says, "Your father's been through a lot." And I wanted to scream, because I'd been through a lot too, and nobody was giving me permission to fall apart. It was around that time I started secretly looking at apartments, just browsing at first. Craigslist, Zillow, Facebook groups, nothing serious. But I'd catch myself daydreaming about a studio apartment with no carpet, about a fridge that only had food I bought, about a lock on the door that no one else had a key to, about silence that felt safe, not heavy. And then came December. The lights, the baking, the shopping. I went all out. Because some part of me still hoped, still wanted that Hallmark movie ending, still believed maybe, just maybe, if I gave enough, loved enough, poured enough, they'd see me. And in a way, they did. Just not how I wanted. Because on Christmas Day, my father saw me and decided I wasn't a daughter. I was a burden, a parasite, a leech. I didn't leave the house that night, not physically anyway, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I was already gone. After my father called me a leech in front of the entire family, I climbed the stairs without a word, step by step, not fast, not slow, just steady. I closed my bedroom door behind me, the same one with the Jordan's room sticker still peeling in the corner, and locked it. It was the first boundary I'd set in that house in years, and as soon as the click echoed through the room, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for half a decade. I didn't cry, not at first. I sat on the edge of my twin bed, staring at the worn carpet, trying to piece together the moment, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. But the words kept playing like a scratched record. "You're a leech. Get out of my house. You take and give nothing." I could still hear the way the air changed in the room afterward, the way forks paused mid-air, the way my cousin Lisa looked down at her plate, suddenly fascinated by mashed potatoes. No one said anything. No one defended me. No one followed me upstairs, not even Mom. And that silence hurt more than the insult, Because silence is a decision, a deliberate one. Around midnight, I heard the front door close softly, the sound of engines, footsteps, laughter trying too hard to be normal, and then quiet. Just the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. I waited for a knock, a text, a note slid under the door. Nothing. My phone stayed dark. At 12:47 a.m., I opened the Notes app and began typing. Not a rant. Not a letter? Just numbers. Mortgage, $1,700. Utilities, $420. Internet plus streaming, $160. Phone plan, $280. Car insurance, $330. Groceries, $600 month. Miscellaneous charges, Target runs, Amazon orders, etc. God knows. Total, $3,490 per month, every month, for nearly 3 years. I stared at that total until my eyes blurred. $3,490, and I'm the Leech? It would have been laughable if it didn't sting so damn much. At 2:11 a.m., I started opening tabs on my laptop. First, my bank account, then my retirement account, then a blank spreadsheet. By 3 o'clock a.m., I had a 3-page document labeled Financial Extraction Plan. That's what I called it. I don't know why. Maybe it made it feel clinical, manageable, like I was prepping for surgery, cutting out a tumor that had wrapped itself around every nerve in my body. The next morning, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my door. Mom, probably. She didn't knock, just stood there a moment, and walked away. I didn't open the door. I had nothing left to say. No energy for guilt or excuses or, he didn't mean it. Because he did mean it. And even if he didn't, he wanted it to hurt. And it did. But pain wasn't the end. For once, it was the beginning. I spent the day mostly in silence, didn't go downstairs, didn't check in, didn't make coffee for everyone like I usually did. I sat cross-legged in my bed, surrounded by notebooks and receipts and years of bank statements. It was like unearthing a crime scene I didn't realize I was the victim of. Every charge I covered, every emergency I bailed them out of, every automatic payment I forgot was still running under my name. I saw my 20s laid out in dollar signs and late fees and overdrafts. I saw the way I had been whittled down to a line item on someone else's budget. At 5:13 p.m., Mom slipped a plate of leftovers outside my door. Didn't knock, didn't say anything, just the soft clink of porcelain on the floor. I let it sit there until midnight, then carried it back to the kitchen and put it in the sink without touching it. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Because that plate, that quiet gesture, it wasn't love. It was avoidance. It was the same cycle, again and again. They hurt me. Ignore it. And expect me to swallow the pain, clean the dishes, and move on like nothing happened. But something had happened. And this time, I wasn't forgetting. By the end of that week, I had a list. Not just of the finances, though that list was long, but of everything else. Everything I gave up. Time, sleep, friendships, vacations, dating, peace. And for what? To be told I was worthless? A parasite? No, no more. I started Googling. How to remove yourself from co-signed loans. Ending shared phone plans without conflict. Apartment checklist for solo renters. I even called my best friend Tessa. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just said, "You can move in here if you need to. I have a futon, and wine, and zero judgment." I cried then, the ugly hiccuping kind, because for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt safe. Safe to be seen, to be held, to fall apart without being blamed for the cracks. That night, I reread every nasty text Dad had sent me in moments of frustration. Every time he'd said I was too emotional, too dramatic, too entitled. I started highlighting them, not for revenge, for record keeping. Because this wasn't just a blow-up. This was a pattern. And I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't a leech. I was just done. The day I walked into the bank, I looked normal. Hair tied back, clean blazer, lip gloss just enough to look put together, a printed folder in one hand and a quiet fury behind my eyes. The teller smiled at me like I was any other working professional. She had no idea I was there to start something that felt like war. "Hi, how can I help you today?" I took a breath and said calmly, "I need to begin the process of removing myself from multiple shared financial obligations with my parents." Her smile faltered just a little. She glanced at the name on my debit card. Jordan Taylor. "You're not married to them, right?" I almost laughed. "No, but you'd think I was, based on how tied in I am to everything." That was the beginning. We sat for almost 2 hours, me and the bank advisor, Mark Jennings, mid-40s, kind eyes, the kind of man who listens without flinching when your voice cracks mid-sentence. I told him everything. How I'd taken over the mortgage payments, the car loans, the bills, the insurance. How nothing was in my name officially, but everything was run through my accounts. How my father had screamed at me on Christmas, in front of everyone, and called me a leech. Mark didn't blink. He didn't act surprised. He just nodded and asked questions like, "Do you co-own any titles? Are you listed as primary or secondary on these accounts? Are they aware you're removing support?" "No," I said. "They're not. And I'm not planning to tell them until it's already done." His face didn't change. "Understood. Let's proceed carefully then." First was the mortgage. Luckily, I wasn't on the loan, just on the auto payment schedule. He said, "All you need to do is cancel your recurring transfer. They'll have to set up their own system or pay manually. Simple, surgical, like snipping a cord with gloves on." We moved down the list. Utilities, gas, electric, water, all paid through my online account, with their names as primary users. I canceled each one systematically, setting end dates 2 weeks out. Enough time for them to switch accounts, if they were paying attention. Phone plan. A little trickier. I was the primary account holder. They were just lines on the plan. I downgraded my plan to a single line, mine, and left them with a prepaid warning email from the carrier that their numbers would be deactivated unless claimed within 5 business days. Car loans. I was a co-signer, not the borrower. Couldn't remove myself without refinancing. But Mark helped me place a freeze on payments through my account. "If they don't pay," he warned, "your credit could take a hit." I nodded. "Let it burn. I'm not saving them at my expense anymore." That night back home, I opened the drawer where Mom kept the grocery receipts and highlighted each item that had come out of my account. $14.99 for organic olive oil, $112 for artisan cheese platters, $79 for shampoo and candles from that boutique brand she liked to pretend was on sale. I wasn't angry. I was awake, fully, terrifyingly awake. The next day, I called Tessa. "Is the futon offer still good?" She didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. When?" 3 days. "That soon?" "If I wait, I'll talk myself out of it." And I meant it, because if I gave them even a hint of my plan, if I so much as left a browser tab open on Zillow, Mom would guilt me with tears, and Dad would rage until I caved. So I said nothing. Not to them, not to my aunt, Not to my cousins, just Tessa, just the bank, just the leasing office of a quiet second-floor walk-up near her place, where I signed a 6-month sublease and paid a deposit with trembling hands. Packing was surgical. I started with the small stuff: jewelry, documents, chargers, my childhood journals. Then came the things that were mine, but they thought were theirs. My grandmother's recipe box, which Mom always said would be hers someday. The framed college diploma that Dad took off the wall last year and never put back. My laptop and work gear, because yes, I was working remote for a tech firm, even if Dad still called it playing on Canva. By the third night, my room looked like it had already forgotten me. It didn't take much, because I never really took up space there, not emotionally, just physically, just financially. The last thing I packed was the letter, 3 pages, typed, not a goodbye, not a plea, just facts. A list of every bill I'd paid over the last 36 months, dates, amounts, sources, clear totals, bank screenshots attached, statements like, as of January 1st, all financial contributions from me will cease. All accounts have been unlinked. No further support should be expected. I ended it simply. You told me to get out, so I am, but I'm not just walking out of the house. I'm walking out of the role you made for me, the silent provider, and I won't be returning to it. No love you, no we'll talk soon, no hope you understand. Because they wouldn't. Not yet. On December 30th, I left. Not with screaming, not with a fight, just with my bags, my paperwork, my new keys. I slipped the letter into a manila envelope, placed it on the kitchen table, and beside it, my house key. Then I walked out the door and didn't look back. The first night in Tessa's apartment felt unreal. I sat cross-legged on her old futon, surrounded by mismatched throw pillows and the scent of lavender detergent, sipping cheap white wine like it was the blood of victory. She put on a comfort show, some crime drama we both pretended to follow, and handed me a blanket without a word. Not, "You okay?" Not, "Do you want to talk?" Just presence. And that presence wrapped around me tighter than any apology ever could. The next morning I woke up early. No alarm, just habit. Years of waking at 6:45 to make sure the coffee was brewed and the heating hadn't gone out because Dad forgot to reset the thermostat again. But this time, no one was expecting me. There was no list of errands, no grocery run, no check-in text from Mom asking me to Venmo her just until Friday. There was only light and silence and my own breath, slow, even, uninterrupted. I stayed in bed for 2 hours, doing nothing. And for the first time in maybe my entire adult life, that didn't feel selfish. It felt sacred. Later that day, I opened my laptop, logged into my bank accounts. There they were. No more auto payments, no more shared bills, no more scheduled withdrawals for people who called me a leech while wearing sweaters I bought. I checked the utilities one by one. Gas, final reading submitted. Electric, confirmation email. Your service will end January 1st. Internet, disconnected. Phone, just my number left. It was done. The foundation had been pulled. The only question left was how long the structure would hold before it collapsed. I waited. 3 days passed. No calls, no texts. I turned my phone off at night, slept like the dead. Tessa kept the fridge stocked. I made dinner some nights. Other nights we just ordered takeout and watched bad TV in our pajamas. It was normal. It was boring. It was everything I never knew I needed. Then came January 3rd, 8:17 a.m. My phone buzzed. Mom, 3 missed calls. Dad, 1 voicemail. Unknown number, Urgent utility message. I let it ring, made coffee, fed Tessa's cat, opened my laptop and searched apartments, because even though the futon was fine and the air was light, I knew I couldn't stay here forever. I wanted walls that were mine, a bed I chose, a fridge I filled without judgment. But first, the storm. By 11 a.m., the texts were coming faster. "Jordan, the internet's out. Did something happen? The gas isn't working. Is the company messing up? Why is my phone saying we're over our data limit? Call us. Now." Then Dad chimed in, "Cutting us off was immature. You're acting like a child. We can't even watch TV. Hope you're proud. You think you're better than us just because you make a paycheck?" I put the phone face down. Not because I was scared, because I was done playing referee between their entitlement and my conscience. That afternoon, a message from Tessa popped up on Slack. "You good?" I typed back. "Everything's falling apart exactly on schedule." Over the next few days, the unraveling became obvious. Uncle James texted me out of nowhere. "Your mom called Patricia crying. They're saying you disappeared, that you cut them off without warning." I replied with a screenshot of my 3-page letter, dated, signed, and left clearly on the kitchen table. I didn't vanish. I opted out. He called me. His voice, gruff but calm. "I had no idea you were paying everything, Jordan. Your dad made it sound like he was still handling stuff." I laughed, bitter. "He hasn't handled anything since I was 23. Silence. Then, "I'm proud of you. It's overdue." That night, I sobbed into a pillow for 10 minutes, not out of guilt, out of relief. Relief that someone finally saw it, said it, confirmed I wasn't crazy. Mom kept texting, not hostile, just desperate. "The water's being shut off. What do we do? The mortgage company called. I don't understand. Why would you do this to us? You didn't even tell me." I wanted to scream. "I did tell you. You just never thought I would follow through." But I didn't reply, because explaining boundaries to people who benefit from your lack of them is a losing game. On the 7th day, the inevitable happened. They showed up. Not both, just Mom. She knocked on Tessa's door like nothing was wrong, like she was coming over for coffee and a hug. I let her in. She looked older, tired, smaller somehow. She said nothing at first, just looked at me with wet eyes. "Why didn't you just tell us?" I stared at her. "You mean, why didn't I beg you to listen again?" She flinched. I didn't apologize. "I told you for years. I asked for change. I asked you to talk to him. I asked you to stop spending, to help me, to see me, and you smiled and brought me another bill." She whispered, "He didn't mean what he said on Christmas." I tilted my head. "That's the thing, Mom. I think he did. And honestly, I needed him to say it, because I needed permission to leave." She said she didn't come to fight, that she just wanted me to come home. I told her I already was. And this little sublease, this futon, this borrowed mug of lukewarm tea, felt more like home than that entire house ever had. That night, I opened a new note on my phone. Title, Aftermath Log. Because now the real fallout would begin, and I wanted to remember every moment of it. Not for revenge, for record, for freedom. It didn't happen all at once. The collapse came in layers, like peeling wallpaper in a rotting house, first quiet, then obvious, then impossible to ignore. A week after Mom showed up at Tessa's door, I got a voicemail. Not from her, from HR at my job. "Hey Jordan, this is Elise from corporate. Just wanted to give you a heads up. There's someone downstairs trying to see you. Says he's your father. He's not on the approved visitor list, and security's involved. But we thought you should know." I froze. I was sitting at my desk, iced coffee in hand, mid-email. I hadn't told anyone at work what had happened. No drama, no backstory, just a quiet shift in emergency contact forms. I played the voicemail again, then again. Tessa was the one who said weeks ago, "He's going to do something dramatic. He won't let you go quietly." I hadn't believed her. I should have. I went to the lobby. He was there. Dad. Leonard. In his rumpled winter coat, with a stain near the collar and eyes that had clearly not slept. Pacing. Agitated. Holding a crumpled piece of mail in one hand, probably a late notice. When he saw me, his face twisted in some strange blend of relief and fury. "There you are." I didn't speak. Not in front of the security guard. "We need to talk, Jordan. You can't just walk away from this. From us." I crossed my arms. "You walked away when you called me a leech." He laughed, sharp, bitter. "Oh, come on. That's what this is about? A word?" "No," I said. "It's about every time you made me pay for things and still made me feel like I hadn't done enough." The guard stepped in. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "You know what?" my dad snapped. "Forget it. Let's see how long you last without a family." And then he turned and walked out, like he had just dropped the mic. I didn't cry. I went back to my desk, typed 5 lines of complete gibberish, then got up and walked to the bathroom. I locked myself in the stall, put my hands on the wall, and breathed. 3 counts in, 3 counts out. He came to my work. He made a scene at my job. The one thing I had built entirely without them, that was the moment it hit me. He wasn't there to fix things. He wasn't there because he missed me. He was there because I had stopped being useful. That evening, I told my boss everything. Heather, mid-30s, smart, scary in a good way. Wore heels that sounded like gunshots on the tile. She didn't blink. "We'll flag his name. He won't get in again. And if you want a security escort to your car for a while, say the word." She paused. "Also, I'm proud of you for drawing the line. Most people never do." I didn't know how to respond to that, because no one had ever said those words to me. Not like that. But the story wasn't over. It was just getting started. Because if Dad showing up at my job was the spark, the next chapter was the explosion. And it began with a single letter in the mail from the mortgage company. And this time, it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my parents' next-door neighbor. The letter arrived by accident. Not to me, not even to my parents. It went to their neighbor, Mr. Carlson, a retired Army vet who's lived next door to them for over 20 years. I used to mow his lawn in high school for $20 and a can of root beer. He always called me kiddo, even after I got my first job. That week, he called me something else entirely. "Jordan, I didn't want to get involved, but this came to my mailbox by mistake. It had your folks' address, but your name was listed in the payment history inside. You should see it." He handed me the envelope in the lobby of Tessa's building. Old-fashioned guy, still delivers things by hand. Still wears ironed jeans and smells faintly like motor oil and peppermint. I opened the letter right there. "Mortgage delinquency, 45 days late. Warning of potential foreclosure. My name listed as the last payment sender." I stared at it. Not because it surprised me, but because I realized this wasn't just their secret anymore. Now someone else knew. Someone outside the bubble. Someone who saw. I didn't ask how he found my address. Didn't ask if he'd spoken to my dad. I just nodded, thanked him, went upstairs, and sat on the floor for an hour staring at the carpet. Because when someone outside your story sees the rot, when a third party confirms that, yes, this is real, you can't unsee it. Mr. Carlson had heard yelling next door, had seen the lights flicker off one night, had offered to lend them a space heater, only to be told, "We're fine." Now he knew they weren't. And now I knew the collapse wasn't just happening in silence anymore. It was visible, public, witnessed. That weekend, the second wave hit. Uncle James called, which was weird, because he never called. He was always text only unless someone's dead. His voice was cautious. "Hey, Jordan, I think we need to talk." Apparently, my father had been calling everyone in the extended family, spinning stories about how I abandoned them without warning, about how I cut off all support out of nowhere, about how my success went to my head. I felt the heat rise in my neck. Did he tell you how much I've paid over the last 3 years? Did he show you the mortgage statements, the bills in my name, the car payments I covered so he could keep driving that damn SUV he refuses to downsize? Silence. Then James exhaled. No, he didn't. But I think we all suspected. We just didn't know how bad it was. That sentence cracked something in me. You suspected? I asked, voice sharp. You watched them act like royalty and didn't ask who was paying for the throne? He didn't defend himself, didn't try to minimize it. He just said, "What do you need from me now?" And I didn't expect that. Not from him, not from anyone. So I said, "Tell the truth." And he did. He started calling other relatives, one by one, told them what I'd told him, forwarded the mortgage letter, shared my spreadsheet, the one I'd sent him after our call. Within 2 days, I got a text from Cousin Mark. "Holy shit, Jordan, I had no idea. Proud of you for walking away. Seriously." Then Aunt Catherine, "I wish I'd seen it sooner. Your father's pride. It blinds people." Then Lisa, the cousin who sat at that dinner table and never looked up once I walked away. "I'm sorry for staying quiet. I just froze. But I'm with you now. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Because for the first time, I wasn't alone in the narrative. Then came the part I didn't expect. Mom emailed me. Not text, not voicemail, not a teary voice in person. Email. Subject line, "I didn't know what we were asking of you." The message was long, rambling, filled with phrases like, "We didn't realize how much you were carrying. Your dad, he's complicated, but so am I." I thought I was protecting him by softening everything. I see now that I was enabling him. "We're making changes." She said they were selling the second car, downgrading their cable package, trying to talk to a financial counselor. "It's messy," she wrote, "and we're not good at it yet, but we're trying. You leaving was the shock we needed." And at the end, she wrote, "I hope one day you'll talk to me again, even just for coffee." I didn't reply right away. I let it sit, because that was the thing about my mom. She always sounded sincere. But words were easy. Change wasn't. Still, something about the message felt different. She wasn't asking me to come back. She wasn't pretending nothing happened. She was naming it, even if clumsily. And that was new. That same night, Dad texted 4 words. "You embarrassed us, Jordan." No punctuation, no apology, just those words. And in those 4 words, I saw everything. He wasn't sorry I left. He was sorry it looked bad. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat down at my desk, opened a new file, titled it Phase 2, Liberation. Because survival had always been Plan A. But now it was time to thrive. After Mom's email and Dad's last bitter text, the narrative was split. Half the family realized they'd ignored the obvious for too long. The other half, still clinging to the old story, the one where I was the ungrateful child who abandoned her struggling parents. But I was done fighting shadows, because now I had proof. I had my voice, and I had an ally who wasn't afraid to speak up. Loud. And her name was Heather, my boss, the same woman who had watched my dad show up unannounced at our office and held her composure like a damn general. A week after the incident, she asked me into her office. I thought it was about performance or maybe a new client. Instead, she handed me a folder. Inside, a nomination form, company-wide initiative, employee of the quarter, based not just on results, but resilience, leadership, and grace under fire. I'm putting your name in, she said, not just for the way you've handled work, but because I've never seen someone survive a personal collapse and show up better. I blinked, because no one had ever framed what I went through that way, as strength, as leadership, as something worthy of recognition, not pity. I told her bits and pieces, about the bills, about the mortgage, about Christmas dinner and the word Leech hanging in the air like smoke. She leaned back in her chair and said, "That's not just family dysfunction, that's economic manipulation." Her words hit me like a cold gust. Because she was right. For years, I had been told I was selfish for wanting to build my own life, that wanting financial boundaries made me cold, that independence was abandonment. But hearing her name it for what it was, manipulation, freed something in me. 2 days later, she introduced me to someone, Margot James, senior partner at a PR consultancy. Big client, big reach, bigger heart. Margot had gone through something eerily similar 10 years ago, supporting 2 siblings, an ill mother, and a father who refused to downsize after retirement. She said she saw herself in me. "You don't owe them your oxygen," she said over coffee. "You've already given them your blood." That day, she offered me 2 things. 1, a chance to speak at an internal leadership event, a 15-minute talk about boundaries, burnout, and rebuilding. 2, a referral for a therapist she swore saved her damn life. I said yes to both. The speech came 2 weeks later. It wasn't flashy, no PowerPoint, just me standing in a room of 40 professionals sharing my story, stripped down and raw. I told them about the spreadsheet, the secret payments, the napkin I folded on the table before I walked away. I told them about the voicemail, the mortgage letter sent to the neighbor, the night I cried into takeout on a futon and felt more free than I had in 5 years. I ended with this. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is say, "I'm not responsible for fixing you. Not anymore." The room was dead silent when I finished. Then, applause. Not polite, not rehearsed. Real, full-bodied, full-hearted. Like people weren't just clapping for me, they were clapping for themselves too, for every boundary they hadn't set yet, for every no still stuck in their throat. That night, I got an email from one of the attendees, a man in his 50s, quiet, kind eyes. He wrote, "Thank you. My daughter stopped talking to me 2 years ago after I criticized her career choice. I thought she was overreacting. Today I realized I might have been the one who never really saw her." I stared at the message for a long time, because that, right there, was the twist I never saw coming. I had spent years chasing validation from a man who couldn't see past his own failures, and here was a stranger, a father, telling me he finally understood his daughter because I told my truth. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Dad was unraveling. Uncle James told me he'd started calling more family members, angry, ranting, saying I'd humiliated him, that I made him look weak, that I aired dirty laundry. James said he shut him down. "She didn't make you look weak, Robert. She made herself look honest." That was the first time I'd ever heard someone in our family correct my father publicly. Apparently, he hung up on James after that, didn't call back. Mom, for her part, kept writing. Small updates. Little signs of effort. They had found a smaller apartment, sold the second car. She was picking up substitute teaching work again. Still emotional, still scattered, but grounded in a way I hadn't seen since I was a child. She asked again if we could meet. Just coffee, my treat, no strings. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. Because the woman writing those emails wasn't the one who slid leftovers under my door and told me to ignore his outbursts. She was trying to show up, and that mattered. But the best part, the twist in all this, wasn't the applause, wasn't the recognition. It was this. For the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval to feel proud of myself. I didn't need them to call me successful, because I knew I was. I had rebuilt myself, not just financially, but emotionally. And that foundation couldn't be repossessed. It was a Thursday, ordinary, cold, the kind of gray, slushy day in January that makes coffee taste like medicine and email feel endless. I had just returned from lunch, warmed my hands around a cup of chai, booted up Slack. Then the receptionist pinged me. "Jordan, there's a Robert Mitchell here asking for you. He's insistent." I blinked. No, there was no way. I walked to the glass and peered into the lobby from the second floor, and there he was, my father, wearing that same worn coat, boots crusted in slush, a folder clutched in one hand and that look on his face, the one that said, "I am the victim here." My body tensed. But this time, I didn't freeze. I walked down. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to. He turned when I stepped out of the elevator. "Jordan, thank God. We need to talk." I didn't smile, didn't even blink. "You're not allowed here. You were told that." "They said I needed an appointment," he scoffed. "But this is family." "That's not how boundaries work. I'm your father, for God's sake." "And I'm a grown woman," I replied, "at her place of employment. Leave now or I'll call security." His face flushed. You could see the gears grinding. He pulled out the folder. "We're losing the house." I said nothing. "We're drowning in bills. Your mother is getting what she enabled," I finished. He dropped the folder on the lobby table. "You want proof? There. Look, final notices, shut-off warnings. Are you happy now?" I picked up the folder, flipped through the pages, then handed it back. "No, but I'm free." He stared at me, not in anger, in disbelief, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time and couldn't recognize who I'd become. "You're colder than I remember," he muttered. "No," I said, straightening my spine. "I'm clearer than you remember. There's a difference." That's when Heather appeared. She didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch, just stood beside me and said, politely but firmly, "Sir, this is a private business. You violated your previous warning. You'll be removed now." Security appeared seconds later. Dad didn't fight it, but as he was led toward the doors, he turned one last time. "You'll regret this, Jordan. One day you'll regret turning your back on your family." I held his gaze. "No, one day I'll teach my daughter what not to accept from the people who claim to love her." He didn't speak again, just walked out, shoulders hunched, folder under arm, a man finally carrying his own weight. After he left, I sat in the break room, staring out at the city, snow still falling, coffee gone lukewarm. Tessa texted. "You okay?" I replied with one word. "Lighter." 2 days later, I got a letter. Not from him, from my mother, handwritten. No email this time, no emojis, just her voice on paper. I didn't know he was coming. I would have stopped him if I could. "He's spiraling. You were right. I let him blame you because it was easier than facing what we'd done." She said she was seeing a therapist, that she was trying to build a life outside of his shadow, that she'd started teaching music lessons again, and, for the first time in years, it made her feel human. At the end, she wrote, "You don't have to respond. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. I see you now." I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer with my other one, the mortgage statement, the spreadsheet, the resignation note from my old life. And for the first time, I didn't feel like burning it. I felt like archiving it. Because the twist wasn't that I had burned everything down. The twist was that I had survived the fire and walked out carrying the one thing they never expected: my voice. People think that when the storm ends, peace returns immediately. It doesn't. There's no sunshine pouring through the clouds. No grand cinematic swelling of music. There's just quiet and ash, and a version of you who no longer fits inside the walls you used to call home. I moved out of Tessa's apartment 1 month after the final confrontation at my office. It wasn't dramatic. We drank boxed wine on the floor and cried a little, then hugged like sisters who had been through war. My new place? A 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a modest brick building with creaky stairs and a view of a parking lot. But to me, it was everything. Because no one had a key but me. No one could knock at 7 a.m. and ask for rent. No one could scream about Wi-Fi passwords or organic groceries or what do you even do all day on that computer. It was my sanctuary. The first few weeks were strange. I would walk into my kitchen and instinctively look for someone else's grocery list. I'd leave Post-it notes on the fridge, forgetting they were only for me. Sometimes I'd cook too much dinner, halfway through preparing to plate 3 servings instead of 1. The ghost of responsibility doesn't vanish overnight, but over time, it faded. And in its place, routine, solitude, quiet joy. I got a plant, just one, a pothos, easy to keep alive. I named her June, after the month I always told myself I'd finally move out someday. She sat on my windowsill like a little green reminder that someday had arrived. I began cooking again, not out of obligation, but pleasure. Simple meals, fresh, budgeted, food that didn't feel like a transaction. I also bought a small bookshelf. Not much, just enough to display a few things. My favorite poetry, a framed photo of me and Tessa from college, a candle that smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke, not to cover up anything, just because I liked it. It wasn't much, but it was mine. At work, things changed too. Subtle, but real. I showed up more energized. My ideas were sharper. I volunteered for a leadership cohort I'd previously avoided because I didn't want to take up too much space. Now, I owned that space, and people noticed. I was no longer the girl who quietly kept things running behind the scenes. I was leading meetings, pitching bold concepts, asking for raises, and getting them. Turns out, when you stop hemorrhaging time and money into a bottomless pit of obligation, you grow fast. I also started therapy with the woman Margot had recommended. First session, she asked, "When was the first time you felt like your needs didn't matter?" I couldn't answer right away. I just sat there, fingers tangled in the sleeves of my sweater, trying not to cry. But week after week, we dug into childhood, into the trip to Michigan where I bought eggs with babysitting money, into the dance recital I skipped to drive Mom to work because the car broke down. We built a map of my life, not to stay stuck in it, but to understand it, to learn which roads were mine and which I had only walked because someone else dropped the compass. I didn't reach out to Mom, but I didn't block her either. She sent short updates, photos of sheet music, a link to a blog post about setting boundaries. She never asked for money, never pushed. She knew, and for that, I was grateful. Dad, though? Still silent. Last I heard, he took a job at a car rental place. Low pay, high hours. Enough to stay afloat, but not enough for pride. I didn't hate him. I just didn't carry him anymore. And not carrying someone, it's the most freeing kind of forgiveness. 3 months after I moved into my apartment, I got an invitation. Handwritten, no glitter, no frills, just black ink on a folded ivory card. We're having a family dinner, not a holiday, not an ambush, just dinner. Please come if, and only if, you want to. Love, Mom. She had underlined "only if you want to" twice. I stared at it for 10 minutes. Then I put it on the counter next to June, my pothos, and walked away. I didn't decide right away. That night, I told my therapist about it. She nodded and said, "It's not about whether you say yes or no. It's about whether you can say yes without betraying yourself." I let those words sit in me like tea leaves. And by the end of the week, I knew I would go, not to please, not to fix, but to witness, to see if the people who had let me bleed dry for years could sit across from me now that I was no longer bleeding. When I arrived, the house looked smaller, not physically, emotionally. It used to feel like a cathedral, where my every movement echoed, judged, replayed. Now, it was just a house, worn siding, sagging porch, the familiar blue door slightly chipped. Mom answered. She didn't hug me, just smiled, eyes wet, stepped aside. "Hi," she said, voice shaking slightly. "You look free." "I am," I said, "and I'm keeping it that way." She nodded. "That's fair." Dinner was awkward at first. She'd made lasagna, my favorite still. The table was smaller, only 4 plates, mine, hers, Uncle James, and surprisingly, Aunt Patricia. Dad wasn't there. I didn't ask, and she didn't offer. Instead, she poured wine and asked me about work. For the first time in forever, she didn't ask about my salary, or whether I had thought about sending something toward the light bill. She just listened. And when I told her about the leadership talk, she cried. Not loudly, quietly. Soft tears falling into her wine glass. "I had no idea how much I had made you carry," she said. "I didn't want to know, but now I do." Patricia, never one to sugarcoat, added, "He still won't say he was wrong. You know that, right?" "I do," I said, "and I'm not waiting for it." After dinner, I helped clear the plates, instinctively, habitually, until Mom gently touched my wrist. "You don't have to clean anymore." I froze, because that one sentence said more than any apology ever could. Before I left, she walked me to the door. It was cold, wind biting. She handed me a small envelope. "Don't open this here. Just later." I nodded. We hugged, tightly, like people who had hurt each other deeply, and still wanted to try. Back at my apartment, I opened the envelope. Inside, a check. Not large, but not small either. $3,000. In the memo, "First repayment." Attached was a note. "It's not everything, but it's a start. If I can't give you back time, I can give you this. Please use it for something that moves you forward." I didn't cash it right away. I held it between my fingers and cried, not because I needed the money, but because for once, it was given, not expected, offered, not extracted, a gesture of atonement, not manipulation. I called her the next day. "Thank you," I said. That was all. And it was enough. I didn't tell many people I cashed the check. It wasn't about the money. It was about the shift. For the first time in years, my mother gave me something without expecting a return. No follow-up texts, no guilt-laced questions, no, "We'll just need a little help this month." She gave it and let it go. And that act, quiet, almost unremarkable, became the clearest sign that things could change. Not overnight, not perfectly, but enough. I didn't move closer to them. Physically or emotionally, we texted every few weeks, a meme, a song, a recipe from my childhood. Sometimes she'd share updates about her students. One of my second graders asked if Beethoven had TikTok. I almost choked. I'd laugh, send a voice note, tell her about June, how my plant had doubled in size and started trailing across the bookshelf like it wanted to claim the whole wall. We didn't talk about Dad, and I didn't ask if she'd left, because I knew the answer, and I knew it didn't have to be mine to solve anymore. The company retreat came in April, a cabin upstate, fire pit, workshops about burnout and growth and becoming your own compass. I led a panel, not as someone who had it all figured out, but as someone who had finally learned how to say, "This is my line, you may not cross it." Afterward, a colleague pulled me aside. She was older, fierce, one of those women you don't expect to cry, and then she does, and it shatters you. She said, "I left my husband last year, 32 years of marriage. I thought I'd die without him, but it turns out I was already dying slowly. You reminded me it's okay to save yourself." We hugged for a long time, and when I got back to my cabin, I sat on the porch alone, stars above, cold air on my skin, and a silence that didn't ask anything of me. I whispered, "Thank you, Dad." Not out of love, but out of recognition. Because had he not pushed me out that night, had he not called me a leech, had he not made it so clear I was disposable, I might never have chosen myself. In June, I visited my grandmother's grave. She had died when I was 17, quietly, without fuss, the kind of woman who crocheted in silence and made pies without recipes. She was the only adult in my family who ever asked me what I wanted, not what I could do for someone else. I brought fresh peonies, sat on the damp bench, and told her everything. The spreadsheet, the lasagna dinner, the folder Dad slammed in my office lobby. I told her I had found peace. Not perfection, not closure, but peace. And she would have understood the difference. Back at work, I received news, a promotion, lead strategist, more money, more autonomy, and the chance to build my own team. I emailed Tessa that night. Guess who's no longer footing bills she didn't choose, but now gets to sign paychecks? She replied with a single gif of Beyoncé walking away from an explosion in slow motion. We planned a weekend trip, just the two of us. Cabin, hot tub, no Wi-Fi, freedom. I still get texts from Dad, not often, just enough to remind me he hasn't changed. The last one read, "Hope you're happy now." I didn't reply, because I am. Not ecstatic, not dancing through meadows kind of happy, but the kind where I can afford therapy, buy fruit that doesn't go bad before I can enjoy it, sit in my own silence and feel safe, the kind of happy that comes from not being afraid of your own life anymore. I still hear his voice sometimes, not yelling, just lingering in my head like a radio station I forgot to turn off. "You're selfish. You'll regret this. Family means sacrifice." And sometimes I almost believe it. Until I remember, the most selfish thing I ever did was let myself be used in the name of loyalty. Here's what I've learned. You can love people and still leave. You can forgive without reopening the door. You can rebuild alone and find yourself stronger than you ever imagined. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's a life lived fully, quietly, on your own terms. It's funny how the quiet becomes your favorite soundtrack when chaos was all you ever knew. That summer, my apartment bloomed. Not just the plants, though June now curled around half the window like she owned it, but me. I painted the walls, soft sage in the living room, warm white in the bedroom. I bought secondhand furniture that didn't match, but made me smile. And slowly, the space stopped being a sanctuary from my past and started becoming a home for my future. My circle grew too, not wide, not noisy, but real. Tessa, of course, still my anchor, still the voice that said, "You're not crazy," when I needed it most. My coworker Liz, who started inviting me to her Sunday soup nights, a group of friends I met through a book club where we cried over fiction and admitted things we hadn't told our own mothers. And then there was Reese. I met him at a volunteer cleanup event downtown. He made a bad joke about biodegradable trash bags and had the kind of smile that made you forget to be guarded. We started slow. Coffee, a walk. 2 weeks later, dinner. He didn't ask about my past on the first date, or the second. When I did tell him, he didn't flinch. He just said, "So you built your own life from scratch. That's badass." I laughed so hard, I nearly choked on my risotto. One weekend, I hosted brunch. Tessa brought homemade scones. Liz brought mimosas. Reese made scrambled eggs with way too much cheese. We sat on my mismatched chairs, ate off thrifted plates, and talked about everything and nothing. At one point, I looked around the room and realized, this is it. This is my family now. No one in that room expected me to save them. No one made me feel like I owed them something for their love. No one used family as a weapon. They just loved me, as I was, not for what I could provide, not for what I withheld, just for being. I kept Mom's letters. She sent one every month, not always long, sometimes a recipe, sometimes a reflection, sometimes just thinking of you, still learning, still trying. I never wrote back, but I read them all. And one day, maybe, when I'm ready, I'll write one of my own, not to start over, but to say, I made it out, and I hope one day you do too. I never went back to that house again, not once. Even when Mom sent a letter in the fall that said, "We're selling it, downsizing, too much space now, too many ghosts, just thought you should know." I didn't drive by, didn't scroll Zillow to see the listing, didn't ask what furniture they took or what memories they packed. That chapter was closed, and not every ending deserves a revisit. I still keep boundaries, not out of spite, out of survival. The kind that says, you don't get to hurt me just because we share blood. I don't owe visits. I don't explain my joy. And I don't accept guilt disguised as concern. Mom and I now have an understanding. Soft, distant, respectful. She writes. I read. No expectations. No demands. Only space. Space where growth can happen, or not. But it's not mine to fix anymore. Dad never apologized, and I've made peace with that. Because when you spend your whole life waiting for an apology, you put your healing in someone else's hands. I took it back, took all the rage and shame and humiliation, and composted it into something I could grow with, something that now looks like peaceful mornings. A savings account with my name only. Laughter that doesn't taste like guilt. Some days I still flinch. At loud voices. At the phrase, you owe me. At Christmas music and department stores. But then I remind myself, I am no longer inside that story. I am the author now, and I get to decide what happens next. It's been almost a year. Since the dinner, since the spreadsheet, since the slam of the front door and the stillness that followed, and I've done things I never thought I could. Created a personal budget, traveled alone to Maine just because I wanted to see the ocean, told a man no without explaining myself, said yes to joy even when it felt unearned. Last month, I gave a talk at a conference on radical self-restoration. It was raw, unscripted, messy. I told the room about the moment I was called a leech, about the mortgage I paid and the key I left behind, about the letter from my mom and the quiet it arrived in. And at the end, I said, "You are allowed to stop bleeding for people who will never give you a bandage." The applause was quiet at first. Then it grew. And after, a woman with silver hair pulled me aside and said, "You told my story before I could." We hugged like we had escaped the same house. Maybe we had. I don't chase closure anymore, I build it. In every meal I cook for one without shame, in every automatic payment I don't make for someone else. In every moment I choose to rest without permission. I'm no longer a daughter who sacrifices silently. I'm a woman who chooses with intention. And that is the ultimate plot twist. To anyone reading this or living it, here's what I want to say. You are not a leech. You are not dramatic. You are not selfish for saying, "I deserve more than being drained." You don't have to burn bridges. You can just walk away, quietly, steadily, one bill, one breath, one boundary at a time. And what waits for you on the other side isn't revenge. It's relief. It's self. It's freedom. And it's the kind of peace you never have to earn, because you were always worthy of it, even when they convinced you otherwise, especially then.